Back in 2005, I got my own place, and the first order of business was to build a skate ramp. A full-size half-pipe wasn't feasible for a number of reasons, so I used what I had available, which was 4 cinder blocks and 2 scrap pieces of plywood. The setup was sketchy, but I skated it every day. I thought it was super fun. The ramps were set up in the basement with the blocks right up against the wall. Having the ramp up against the wall was nice because then the wood couldn't move. I'd also set up the ramps outside when the weather was warm. One advantage of these ramps was that they were easy to move and you could set them up or tear them down in just a few minutes. The plywood on the original ramp was 1/2 inch thick. The plywood on this new ramp in this video is 3/4 inch thick. The thicker wood made the transition from the pavement onto the plywood kind of rough, but that could be remedied by attaching a thin piece of wood to the bottom. I weigh about 50 pounds more nowadays compared to back then. Today, weighing in at 200 plus pounds, I'd probably crack 1/2 inch plywood. With the original setup, only one of the ramps had a thin piece of plywood on the bottom. Had I had more 1/4 inch plywood back then, I would have put it on both ramps, but I didn't, so I would just lift the nose a little bit when riding onto the plywood. The 1/2 inch plywood on the original was roughly 32 inches by 35 inches. The 1/4 inch piece was roughly 32 inches by 15 inches. This new ramp is the same dimensions, except the 1/4 inch piece is a lot smaller, roughly 32 inches by 4 inches. Ideally, the thin board would have been bigger, but this small piece was all I had on hand. It's held on with 2 roofing nails. Periodically, the nails will pop out a bit and need hammered back in. These nails are a little too long and press into the pavement, forcing them back out of the wood. If the thin piece were a little longer, I could move the nails up the ramp some so they wouldn't hit the pavement. The thin piece of wood I was using in this video broke only after a couple of tries, possibly because the piece wasn't wide enough or the gap it was spanning was too wide. The ramp itself also needs constant adjusting as the plywood tends to slide backwards a little every time I ride up it, or in some case when the wheels collide and bind at the bottom of the ramp. I don't recall this happening as often with the old original setup. Adjusting the pitch of the board by moving it forward or back helped remedy the problem, as well as approaching the ramp slower with some finesse. As soon as I started to get a feel for the ramp, my camera battery died. To get the full enjoyment out of this setup, it's best to have 2 ramps. That way you can ride back and forth whilst tic-tacking in between to maintain the momentum. I imagine legit skaters would probably rather just launch off these like the kickers they are. Regardless, back in the day, I had a blast seeing how many times I could go back and forth without putting a foot down to push. I would do front-side pivots, backside pivots. I would ride up regular stance and back down fakie, or vice versa. Fast forward to 2019. I was working as a school bus driver. The schedule gave me a lot of extra free time. Up until that point, I had primarily worked doing manual labor, so the change to a job where you sit for an extended period of time started to make my back hurt. I thought if I had skate ramps again, I could ride back and forth after work, and that would help strengthen my back. In 2020, when the schools closed due to COVID, I decided to make a half pipe out of cement, but that's for another video.